In this first exercise, we're going to start out exceedingly simple by tackling a pendulum. All we need to worry about in this instance is just one item on one channel. So here's what we're going to do to start with. We're going to imagine the pendulum is held up like this, and when we let it go, so to speak, it will start swinging. How long should it take to swing? Well, it depends on, the weight of the ball at the end of the pendulum and so on. But for now, we're just going to start out by roughing it. So I'm going to start out here at 20 frames, and I'll bring it round the other side like this, and we'll go another 20 frames, and we'll bring it out the other side here, and another 20 frames, and bring it back. I'm sure you're getting the idea. By this point, we're just going side to side to side every 20 frames. There's really nothing more special or skillful to any of this. It's pretty basic and bog standard. Once we're done with that, we can of course then just, have a hit of play here and see what happens. And it's really a bit rubbish so far. I mean, it's going, obviously, it is rotating, but it's very rigid and unlifelike. So what we really need to do in this exercise is to just look at the basics of timing and spacing. We can see that perhaps the timing isn't that bad, this 20 frame period to make a full swing, that's not so bad at all. It could perhaps be a bit better, but we'll see, I guess. However, the spacing is quite wrong. We can see that we have a nice arced motion path for the actual, weight on the end here, of course, but then it would be because it's just at the end of this part that's rotating. It is essentially orbiting. And it's not easy to see the spacing on these keys because, of course, the path is just overlapping over and over. Of course, the problem is the fact that everything is just linear keyed. It's just going bounce, bounce, bounce like this in a full linear fashion. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can deal with this. What we need it to do, slow down as it approaches, one extreme and sort of hang momentarily, and then we, do the same at the opposing side. There's a couple of ways we can do this. Let's have a look at the first way, shall we? The first, quite simply, is just to key it manually. So let's come out to some point. We're going for a 20 frame swing, so let's sort of guesstimate a delay at either side of about 4 frames. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's just roll it back a bit. And of course you can see the evolution of the shape here. It's, going slow and then picking up rotational speed. And we'll come out to the other one, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll put a similar shape on this side, like this. Go to the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, again, just bring it back like that. Come to the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4 before it, bring it back out to a little bit of a hold there, 1, 2, 3, 4 after, once again, just push it back, sort of hover slightly around that point, and this is basically all that we are going to do here, is sort of try and sketch in this curve by manually placing keyframes here. This, of course, is a perfectly valid technique, perhaps not for this, but we'll see how we get on. But certainly in animation as a whole, as we've explored when talking about the various, techniques to keyframing things and the like, doing stuff in this way is a perfectly good skill to try and practice. So, let's do the one on the other side, sorry. So, let's see how that's looking now. Okay, you see that already that is looking significantly better by the addition of these keyframes that we've put in. Looks a little bit weird as it goes from, there and back to the beginning again, but ignore that. What you can see, of course, is that we do very strongly have this idea of the slowdown and then the swing again. We really are starting to get the sense of weight and momentum and the overlap of the forces as the swing force pushes it one way and then of course starts to cancel out and gravity pulls it back, swinging it the other. So you can see that just with some very simple keyframes and of course very rough looking animation curve, we do actually get a motion that starts to look an awful lot better very quickly. So let's try out the other method, shall we? We can get rid of all of those keyframes that we just created and come back here. And the other method, of course, is to use the spline interpolation method. We can just switch all of the keys over from being linear to a TCB spline, and we see that we get broadly the same sort of behavior. Obviously, we get this gradual speed up coming out of an extreme and a gradual slow down into it. Of course, this isn't such an easy thing to control. You can sort of, try tweaking your continuity and so forth, but of course that will only swing your key one way or the other. It won't really do much for the actual shaping of it. We can try that if we want by trying a different curve type. Let's go for the Bezier since it's going to be the most common. And what we can do is grab and stretch these handles like this to create a sort of a rounder top, a rounder bell to the shape of the curve like this. And you see that as we accentuate the bell shape, as it were, the swing becomes much more pronounced in how it holds at either end of the swing. This there, we see. Now it's perhaps pausing a little bit too much, of course. It's getting right up to, one extreme and it is almost hanging. It's almost hanging completely still. So one of the things that, of course, we can do here is to, really get this tweaked down by just tweaking the curve until we get the exact right amount of swing and hold into our curve here. Often for a simple pendulum motion like this, you will find that the TCB is the most preferable, as its rate at which it slows out, accelerates away and then slows back in is pretty good. That's one of the reasons why so commonly when doing, even complex character animation, you can resort to using TCB a lot of the time. And it will still give you a nice, smooth and natural flow and interpolation between keys. Of course, the other thing that we see here is that our pendulum is swinging to full extremes. Now, we haven't quite matched them exactly. We probably could do that, try and get them all to be exactly the same value so it's a perfectly symmetrical swing. And in that instance, it would infer that the pendulum were being driven by some sort of motor. Even if driven by some sort of motor, even if this is an active motion, it still needs to have the slow down and speed up again, because a motor can't just, change direction instantaneously. But if this is a free swinging pendulum, then of course what it needs to do is to swing less and less and less on each subsequent swing. So let's see how much we want to reduce it by. We're starting off here at 80, well, negative 80. On this very first keyframe. So we don't want it to swing all the way out to 80 on the second. We see at the minute it's about 70-ish. So let's bring it down to about 3/4 of what it was, which is about 60. We'll keep this same sort of rate of reduction, and that's something that we want to see here. We're not reducing it by 20 degrees, which would infer, of course, that this goes to 40. That would be wrong. What we're doing is reducing it to 3/4 of its previous swing. So if this was 60, then we want 3/4 of that. So this next one would actually come out to about 45. This one would come out to 33 and a bit. This next one come out to about 25-ish, and to about 18-ish, and then finally about 13 and a half, something like that. And so what we see now is our pendulum is, of course, losing momentum as it swings from one extreme to the other. But of course, while still having that same kind of hold at each side. And you see that even though we haven't adjusted our curve, we haven't changed any of the TCB properties, or if we were using Bezier handles, we wouldn't have, done much shrinkage on the Bezier itself, that we're still getting this natural period of hang at each side. You can, if you want, start to tweak the continuity a little bit on these later ones, so it does start to swing out just that little bit earlier, doesn't perhaps hang quite as long. That's something that's, perfectly fine to do, as long as you don't want to make it too sharp that it becomes like a linear corner. And there we get just this nice, steady pendulum that's coming out of this initial drop and gradually slowing down.